Thanks for staying with us tonight here on The Ed Show. Imagine for just a moment that President George W. Bush committed to finding Osama bin Laden instead of focusing on going into Iraq. Imagine that bin Laden had been captured or killed on Bush's watch instead of President Obama's. Now imagine the Democrats in Congress refusing to honor the mission that brought bin Laden to justice. Pretty hard to imagine, right? Well, that's exactly what House Republicans are doing today. Let me explain. This week, the Senate passed a resolution honoring the men and women who helped take down bin Laden. They did so unanimously. Can you believe this? Republicans and Democrats in the Senate voting 97-0 in favor to do it. But Speaker Boehner over the House, well, he doesn't want to pass a similar resolution in the House. He says the mission has already been acknowledged.
I think all of the members have issued press releases recognizing those who are responsible for this success in taking down bin Laden.
Did you hear that? A press release. That shows you, folks, just how much they really care. You see, Boehner banning voting on symbolic resolutions, he did that when he took over in January. And he doesn't think saying thank you to our troops is important enough to break that pledge. Why not?
We're pretty well committed to the House doing substantive work on the floor of the House.
Aha, substantive work. He must be talking about votes on defunding NPR and Planned Parenthood.
And all of the commemorative resolutions that used to be brought to the floor of the House, some of them I thought were quite meaningless.
Really? So he must be referring to resolutions members of his own caucus proposed while Democrats were in charge. A resolution to make sure we celebrate Christmas. A resolution to honor a march promoted by Glenn Beck. But when it comes to our troops, Speaker Boehner thinks a press release is going to get the job done. Joining me now is Reverend Al Sharpton, president of the National Action Network. It is, at this point, about respect, is it not?
No, it's not only about respect. It is certainly that, and you're right. But it's also about at what point do you go above the partisan banter and say that there's some things that you step outside of the norm? I mean, all Americans were threatened, and all kinds of Americans were killed in 9/11. So, I mean, if this is not a part of unified way of saying we're going to break out of whatever self-imposed ceremony, because it's self-imposed, what will? Imagine if Nancy Pelosi had said the same thing, what the right wing would be saying about her tonight.
Well, it seems Republicans do everything they can for the troops when they're in a position to gain. But in this, who would gain, who would also be recognized, would, of course, be President Obama for making the decision.
No, exactly. They would have to also salute the president and the flawless way it was carried out. And let's be clear, and you've been saying it, Ed, this president took tremendous political risk doing this. Imagine what the Republicans on the floor of the House would have been saying if anything had gone wrong in this operation. And they would have been able to say, and the president's own advisors advised against it, and he went and did it anyway. The fact that it's the reverse, they want to now not give him full credit. We see all of a sudden the articles saying George Bush wants more credit. We've not seen George Bush's people denounce those articles or say those articles are wrong. So what are we looking at here? Even as something as serious as this, we can't get past the partisan banter. This is, in my opinion, very petty and trivializing something very significant.
Well, should the Democrats in the House smack down this? I mean, should they make more of an issue of this and just smack down the attitude of the Speaker?
I think they should press it. I think they should challenge him. If I were on that floor, I would make him stand up and argue with me as to why this should not supersede whatever self-imposed rules the House made, really the Republicans in the House made, that they don't want to do proclamations anymore.
Everything that we've gone through here in the last week, Reverend Sharpton, has been noted by many as an opportunity to bring the country together. You have spent a career trying to bring people together in the name of justice and civil rights and what's fair in society. Is it not fair right now for Americans to expect all this partisan bickering to go aside and give do what people are due and put politics aside? How should the president try to accomplish that?
Well, I think that he has tried to in the last couple of days to do that by reaching out, inviting former President Bush, by trying to set a nonpartisan tone. I remember when 9/11 happened. I was in New York. I live in New York. And there wasn't the partisan bickering when everyone stood with George Bush when this happened. Why? Because everyone faced death that day. Blacks, whites, Latinos, common workers is who was killed in that building. And this is the same man who took credit for killings at embassies in Kenya and killings in Tanzania. So you're talking about somebody that the whole world could say, wait a minute, this was a bad guy. I don't celebrate anybody's killing, but I certainly celebrate stopping something that really touched all of us. And if we can't unite when a precise, successful mission went forward, if we can't get past the bickering like we did when George Bush was president in 2011 when it happened, I think it's a sad commentary on those that can't rise to that occasion.
Did the president do the correct thing today? He's being criticized by a number on the right saying that he's taking a victory lap. The president being here today, was it the right thing to do?
I think that a victory lap would have not been to come and lay a wreath on the grave of those that were killed, to talk to the families of victims, is to do the opposite of a victory lap. It is to really say this is about the lives of Americans that was lost. This is about trying to give some justice to those who will never have those family members again. I think by his coming is to put focus back on what this was all about and not about him. Just walking into partisan or bipartisan gatherings at the White House and leaving it there would have been the victory lap. He brought it back to the scene of the crime, to the victims of the crime, and I think that was not only appropriate, I think it was applaudable.
Do you think New Yorkers wanted him to do it?
I think New Yorkers absolutely wanted him to do it, and Americans wanted him to do it, because many of us that are in New York, live in New York, and even in the aftermath of this are living in the trauma of what happened then, hoping nothing happens in reaction to this, because we lived under this for days, for weeks. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We didn't know where the next thing was coming from. And the president at that time, George Bush, who got unprecedented support when he rode down to Ground Zero, decided not to go after who was the one that did it. He went after weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that was not there. Many of us felt disappointed in that because he had unprecedented bipartisan rallying around him to say we've got to stop this kind of conduct on American soil.
Reverend Sharpton, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks so
you,
much.
Ed.
You bet. Eric Cantor is backing off the GOP Medicare plan. He's calling it a starting point. We'll tell you what that really means. And later, the great debate. Watch some Division III fireworks take place as 5 Republicans talk amongst themselves.